Hello everybody and welcome back to the Documentaries podcast. I'm your host James Leonard, joined by my good friend Timmy Long.
Hey everyone.
And this week Ron is on the decks, I should say. Say hi Ron.
Hi Ron.
Hi Ron. And we've got John Creedon in the studio. How's the form, John?
Not bad. Palpitating a little bit because first of all I'm sorry for being late, but number two is I often hear Timmy talking there about imposter syndrome, and I've got it bad today, right? Because Timmy often said that he often felt he wasn't good enough, or well, I've never done a stretch in prison, and as far as I know, I'm not battling any addiction or anything, so I'm suffering desperately from imposter syndrome. And it's not even that I don't feel good enough; I don't feel bad enough to be here, right?
That's the first time I've ever heard that one. Nice shot.
I mean, look at these two bad boys.
But you're an Ari by the skin of your teeth.
I am just by the skin of my teeth, but delighted. Yeah. I grew up in Cork Street, just over Patrick's Bridge there,
across from Bridge Street and Leitrim Street.
Yeah, that was our turf by, all the way from Dominic Street, from Shandon down to the train station. Really was our.
So like back in those days, if you're looking at the funeral home and the hotel. Yeah, like was there houses, people living in them houses where the shops are now?
Absolutely, yeah. It kind of saddens me in ways to see the place has run down, but it's the nature of things. Nothing ever stays the same.
That part of the city is kind of neglected, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It is just that little pocket. But the only thing is that I often think people say it's very multicultural around there, because I'm back living roughly in the same area. I'm up the hill a small bit. I've moved up in the world a bit. Yeah. But the thing is that. It was always multicultural. I mean, it was a really colourful childhood. I spent 13 years in Dublin, and I'd hear fellas from Rathfarnham talking about Culture, and I'm going, Culture? I had Armenians living next door. There was a guy from Uganda living upstairs, right? We had the Turkish Delight Factory. We had a late night club and comedy club, and I grew up in a late night shop. So it was a colourful existence.
What was it like growing up in the city centre?
Great. I mean, you get very used to all that goes with it, There's a fight in the street. There's nothing new about that, and because it was a late night shop, obviously you were exposed to all of that. But I had great parents and a big family. I'm one of 12, and
jeez, that's a big family.
It is a big family. Actually, was a fellow in my class. He was one of 14. I remember he said to me one day. He said, I said to my mum, I said, "Ma'am, do you love us?" He said, "Love you? I don't even know halfie." But my parents were, and they were brilliant, I have to say, and everything that life threw at them, they were still in love all the way, and they were generous to a fault, and that was often taken advantage of, I think, be times. But I remember one night, there was this fella caused havoc in the shop, and it was big, tall, strong man in his 40s, and he was drunk, and but he attacked this taxi driver who came into the shop, and he was effing and blinding and roaring at my mother and everything else, and I'm like fisticuffs now was not my chosen subject, but I managed to try and protect the taxi man by grabbing him around the arms like that. But between the kicking and the bucking anyway, the two of us fell over and he hit his head and cut himself. And when the guards came eventually, he was what he didn't call my mother, but I remember she wouldn't let him be taken away until she dressed the wound, and even when she was washing it, and he was effing and blinding her and everything else, and she was a very quiet woman, very quietly spoken. And I said to her afterwards, I said, "Ma'am," I said, "how'd you put up with that?" She said, she said, some poor woman's baby once. And the penny dropped, I kind of realised that, we're all folks. We're all stumbling around. If we weren't flawed, we wouldn't be here.
The ability to forgive, it's a very powerful act. There's a piece on YouTube there. I'd encourage people to watch it, but it's about the Green River Killer. He's one of the most notorious serial killers in the United States. He killed about 40 women, right? And when he was being sentenced, I think he got the death chair. You can imagine the death penalty. But there was victim impact statements. The judge allowed the victims of the families to approach him and explain how his actions had impacted on them. So one after another, they lined up to this monster. "You hope you're born in hell. You destroyed our lives. You killed my daughter. She was innocent. You're an animal. You're this, that." And he just stood there like ice. And they're like, "This man is not human. He's a monster." And one father came up, right? And he says, "You know what?" He says, "I actually forgive you. I feel sorry for you. That somebody could do some heinous things to so many bad people. I actually feel sorry for you." And the Green River Killer broke down in tears in the box, and that had way more of an impact.
Yeah. It's like, do you remember Gordon Wilson, the time of the Enniskillen or the Enniskillen bombing, and they blew up the cenotaph. The IRA blew up the cenotaph, and they knew there'd be a gathering of Protestants there at it, and Unionists and so on. And sure, he was knocked senseless. He was an old man, but his daughter, who was probably in her 30s, was a nurse, and she was beside him in the rubble. And he managed to get a hand. He could barely touch her, and she said, "Daddy, I'm dying," you know. And that's how she died. But immediately he forgave the IRA. He said, like, if I was one of them, I'd be doing what they do. If they were me, they'd be doing what I do. And like, it was just so, if you, for the want of a better term, disarming. It's like, I came across a great thing in Eckhart Tolle's little book, Stillness Speaks. And he said, if you were born into her family at her time, with her DNA, her life experience, and her level of consciousness, you would walk, talk, and behave exactly as she does.
I know.
For God's sake, be compassionate, will you? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
that, you know, unless you'd believe people are genetically evil, there has to be a reason why people are.
It's the nurture side of people. It's the experiences, the influences of other human beings that are bringing them up as well, have a massive part in it. But when you come through some form of adversity in life, like myself and James now, and the different experiences we've had, you see people that are actually living in the experience that you would have had, and the compassion and empathy you could have for those people, knowing that where they are in their own lives. Yeah,
you've actually reminded me of another time in the shop, because there was always something going on in the late night shop. We didn't close until 1 a.m, right? So
what did you sell?
It was fags, cigarettes, like groceries, news agency, that kind of thing, and. But I mean, of course, with the Hilton across the road and stuff, there was always show bands coming in and bits and bobs and all that stuff. But I remember one Christmas, actually, going down to visit my dad. I was living in Dublin at the time, and he said to me, there was always some character in the shop, but he said to me, come out a second. So I came out. There was an old man outside, and he was saying, "Connie, he's very bad. I brought him downtown this morning. Would he have a cup of tea? No. Coffee? No. Nothing. Christ almighty, I had to bring him back up and throw him into the bed again." My dad said, he's talking about himself in the third person, right? That's how he was. So the next thing was, anyway, there was another fella there, and he was in the Simon, right? And a lot of the Simon guys used to come into the shop to cash in the coins for notes. And there was this fella there, anyway, Donny, and he was always Graham McCree. "Mr. Creedon, Connie Creedon, your son is a trout boy, you're one of our own boy, you understand us," and all that kind of stuff. So my dad was bending down, getting something out of the glass case, and next thing he spotted Tommy nipping across the other counter and grabbing a whole load of apples and oranges, whatever he could grab. Like, so my dad got up, "Get out, you tramp," he says, you're not a friend of mine, get out, Tom, get out." And your man legged it. So about 3 or 4 hours later, about 1:30 in the morning, I'm sitting inside in the kitchen talking to my dad. We're drinking tea and chatting away, and next thing is we hear on the window outside. But I said, "Leave it go, Dad." I said, "It's the story of our lives. There's always someone looking to use the phone or something, right? And it might be some fella stuck for a pint of milk or a packet of fags. I'll go out anyway." So I went out with him anyway and opened up all the chains and the locks and the bolts and the door and everything else. "Who's outside the door?" "Your man. He'd gone away. He obviously had a bottle to a Buckfast Abbey, forgot where he robbed the stuff, and came back to the scene of the crime." So he's at the door and he goes, "Connie," he says, "you wouldn't have an old bag for this lad, would you?" He'd forgotten completely that he'd stolen from him. So I looked at my dad, and my dad looked at me. My father said, "John, 2 brown bags for the gentleman there." And we loaded up the apples and oranges, and he went, "I see you drop up during the week, you can't again." And I just thought, I was thinking to myself afterwards, like, maybe my dad is Santa Claus, like, you know, because like he would take it on the chin. He'd let it roll. He knows you come into the world naked, and there's no pocket in the shroud. So
sounds like you were brought up by 2 really conscious people and good people, John.
They were very, like, they were gentle they were good to a fault, really, in ways. I mean, they kind of ended up going skint themselves in their old age. But like, people would come into the shop for a sliced pan, and my mother would be trying, "I'll give you a brown loaf for the same price for the kids," you know, to try and. So my mother was very nurturing. All right, she was very good.
Where was school for you?
School was like it was for a lot of people at the time. It was rough in parts and brilliant in other parts. So I started out in Eason's Hill.
Oh, no, Eason's Hill, yeah.
And with the pony and everything.
Right
else.
Under the clock.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I have to say, I love that part of town.
There's actually a recovery meeting in that building.
I knew they were using it for. There was kind of a public space now, so that's where I started out. But I was tiny, like I was. all my life I've been the youngest kid in the class, and so that's how it was. Same in the Northman.
Were you put into school at an early age?
I was. I'd say I suppose there were so many of us. As soon as you could tie your laces, next, yeah, right. So anyway, the Northman for primary school, and again that was mixed. Yeah, it was like the corporal punishment, which we know now.
What was it like back in the day, John?
The bit I found hardest, I mean, obviously the slaps hurt, and they did use the leather. I often wonder about the people who made those leathers. Someone had to make them to manufacture these thick straps.
If there's a market for something, why it'll be made. It doesn't matter what it is. If there's a market, it'll be made.
It's the people that are carrying out the action of the whipping.
Yeah, but
I often wonder what's going through their head. Like,
this might sound mad, no, but I'm channeling Gordon Wilson here, and I'm saying I forgive him because, look, a lot of those guys, like, I think for a country our size, as it was, 3 million people, to produce 10,000 holy men per generation. I don't think they all had vocations, really. In many cases, it was the eldest boy. It was an education. So there was a lot of them desperately frustrated. They shouldn't have been inside there with 51 mad. Like there was 51 in my class, and there was 51 in Mon A B, and there was 2 other 51s across in the other in Mon B. Yeah. So there was 204 kids in every year. It's a whip and a chair you're going in there. So these were young men who probably should have, been at home with their wives. I know. And so at a certain level, I can only speak for myself,
Are at home with their husbands nearly.
Or in some cases, yeah. And the thing about it is, I feel we were all victims in that entire system, Like a lot of the nuns as well probably had no vocation. I remember actually saying it to an elderly nun once down in Blackrock. I said to her, do you know you have a bad old reputation? She said, I know. She's like, there's, a lot. And I said, in fact, I had another very interesting meeting with a nun up in the Good Shepherds, not the Good Shepherds, the Poor Clares up in Galway. They're an enclosed order as well. Yeah. But I remember straight up I asked her. I said, "It must be very tough." I said, "Being a young nun," I said, "and you're there with a class full of kids all day, and then these handsome daddies come to collect them at 3 o'clock when you've got to go back down to the community." She says, "Yeah, it can be tough going, all right." And I said, "How do you deal with it?" She said, "Like most decisions," she said, "you're never 100% sure of anything," she said, "but if you can stick with the 60%, you'll get there eventually," she said, "so no regrets." But like, that was, so the whole thing was tough, like, it was tough on all of us, tough on the guards, tough on the teachers, tough on...
The man secondary as well?
No, I went off to boarding school then, and I suppose growing up in the city centre and all that, and my mother and father probably thought me better idea if I went to a boarding school.
Where was that?
So they sent me to Killarney. And that was a bit of a culture shock, all right, because again,
city boy down in Killarney, like.
Yeah, I had a Cork Hibs outfit.
Cork Hibs,
they're all wearing Kerry jerseys. I never played Gaelic football. Around the streets where I grew up, it was always soccer and hurling. So for us, it was Christy Ring and Wiggy. It was Cork Hibs and the Glen. Like that's where it all happened for us. And all of a sudden, these fellas were playing big ball.
It's even still like that today, and the hurling and the soccer is way more popular in the city, and then the Gaelic football is kind of in the towns.
Yeah, but do you know the reason for that? Well, my understanding anyway is when the GAA was formed, when they in the late 1800s, when they tried to standardise Gaelic games, because it was house rules wherever you went. You can kick in the shins or you can't kick in the shins. So when they tried to standardise the games, it was Munster rules were being adopted for hurling, and Antrim were complaining about it. Down, a lot of the northern counties were very fed up, saying no, Munster was winning the argument really in terms of what the standard for the game should be. And that meeting was held in Hayes' Hotel in Thurles. It's actually the home of the GAA, really, I suppose. And the Ulster counties walked out in a huff. They said, "Keep it. If that's the way it is, keep it." And they walked out, and ultimately Munster rules were adopted. And if you were to stick a compass into Hayes' Hotel and draw a circle around it, that's where hurling is strong today. Tipperary, Kilkenny, Wexford, Waterford, East Cork, North Cork, Limerick, Clare, South Galway. That's it. Going to West Kerry, West Cork, it's not really that strong. And if you go north of Offaly, like it's amazing. And people often say it's because you need good land, you need good flat land to play hurling. I don't buy that. I think it's to do with the fact that it was the game as it was played within 100 miles of Thurles.
Yeah, it makes sense though. Yeah. What was it like in the boarding school?
Again, mixed. you know, it's amazing. People often talk about one good adult and all that, but it was tough going. I was 11. I was the youngest kid in the school, so yeah, that was tough going. I look back on it really, and you know, you're trying to be a little man, and you're trying to get it together, and
you're longing for your parents and your family.
Yeah, I just found it hard to keep up as well in school, you know. So that's when I first realised how thick I was, but
you know, when you're the smallie, like a year is a big difference. Like, you know, if you go into school at the age of 4 and your class are 5, a year is a lot. That's 20% of your life, and young people develop a lot in 12 months, you know. So if you're going into the school at 4 and the rest of them are 5, already you're at a disadvantage, you know what I mean? And you could be behind the whole way along. Yeah. Whereas if you went in at the right age, maybe you're not.
That makes a huge difference. I didn't realise it then, obviously. I thought it was cute being the youngest in the school, like, and I also thought it was cute not being from Kerry. But funny thing is, I was talking to someone recently about your ego and about trying to get behind that, trying to drop down deeper. And I know you meditate regularly, and I'm a kind of I won't say a failed meditator, because I do return to it betimes, and I know there's no such thing as a good or a bad meditation, but sometimes when I do drop down and I get in behind my head and behind the thinking and behind the personality to who I really am, I get that understanding that all this stuff out here is personality, and I often give the example. I was saying it to some kids recently that, like, there was a time when I was 11, and for the whole first year in boarding school I wasn't allowed home, but the second year I used to get home on Sundays and go to Flower Lodge, and but when I was an 11-year-old boy,
Parky Ring now, people will know what that is.
Yeah, it's Parky Ring now. But I used to just to see Hibs playing, and I loved it. Like, I just loved being back with the Cork accents, with the Hibs boot boys. There's no one going to touch me now. I'm with my tribe now, right? And so for me, that's why I think I still have that huge emotional connection to Cork City Football Club. It's urban, it's working class, it's subculture, it's Jack Russell's, it's us, and I just always loved it. But to see Hibs playing, it meant there was only one way getting back to Killarney. That was getting a train from Cork up to Mallow, and I had to wait on the platform for Mallow for nearly 3 hours to get the Dublin train at 7 o'clock that was coming through. So after a couple of weeks, the CIE man spotted me and said, "Are you all right there, kid?" And I said, "Yeah, my dad drives a bus for CIE." And I said, "Oh, come in for a cup of tea." So I got to know the boys up there. But I was thinking, like, I was once that boy. I was 11 years of age. I didn't shave. I was a virgin. I hated girls. I hated Kerry people. And look at me now. I have 4 kids. I'm an orphan now. My mum and dad are gone. I do shave. I'm good at Kerry people again. And I'm mad about girls.
They grew on you, did they?
So the point is, so which one am I? Is that boy dead? I mean, his hair is grown out, those fingernails, every cell in my body has replaced itself, so I'm not my body. And I'm not my mind, because I changed my mind 1,000 times. So who am I? And that's kind of, that's what I've been curious about since I was a kid. So that's why I would dip into
spiritual. Yeah. I suppose you're just really adapting into something that is an easier way of living, really. You know, it's all about finding yourself as well, isn't it? It's about finding what works for John. It's about finding what works for James, and what works for you in a way that you're not harming anybody else, and you're healing yourself, and you're also feeling better about yourself, where your confidence is getting stronger, self-esteem issues, you know. Even you said something there earlier on about maybe when you were a kid you would have felt in tick, you know. It's about for me, it was about even overcoming all these insecurities that I would have had about education, about not being good enough and all that. And that for me is the progression in life. That's about really going towards that authentic person, you know, where the materialistic things in life, you know, mean nothing anymore. You know, some things are there because they help you to be more efficient in life and do things better and faster. Tools, a van, you know, but they don't matter at the end of the day. It's when you come to a place in life where the most important thing in your life is how you feel about yourself and the bit of peace that you have inside in the head, where the voice isn't completely critical and negative constantly. That's the road.
The realisation as well, John, like what you were saying there, and Timmy, is about kind of realising, understanding that we're not, our bodies are our thinking, and the body is a vessel,
or our past,
and the mind is not you, but we're something a bit more deeper than that, you know. It's a bit more spiritual than that. And there's Jungian psychology, they talk about individuation. It's about trying to become your real self, your true self, and that takes a lot of time. But I think when you're young and you don't have that awareness, and you are your physical appearance, you know what I mean, and you can get very self-conscious. But I think as you get a bit maturer, you kind of don't give a shit as much. You know what I mean?
I'm starting to let myself go now. I like to work out, but I think at this stage of my life I can start. But do you know what you reminded me of there? There was a song I remember one day looking at my dad asleep in the passenger seat, and he was pushing on. He was around the 80 mark, and he was like an old. He was a very funny man, like an old bag of bones. But he used to say, I remember we were actually going to Westport, and he said to me, "Where are we going, Westport?" He said, "What's the rush? 2 skids in a jam on, we'll be there." Like, and a close shave, Dad. But anyway, he was sitting there and he was snoring away in the passenger seat, and I was looking at him, thinking of how fond I was of him, because he really was a lovely man. But a song came on the radio, Willie Nelson. My body's just a suitcase for my soul.
Yeah.
And I thought, brilliant. My dad always travelled light. Like, even with the day he died, all he had in his little bag was, he had the pyjamas, he had a picture of Patsy Frayne, a picture of Patsy Frayne and a match programme, and a couple of bob, 18 quid or something. And he always travelled light. He was a real kind of cowboy, but he was always on the road. He was a bus driver anyway, but he loved the road, and he'd stay with me for a couple of days, and my sisters Nora and Vorneen, and he stayed with all of them. And he moved, he was nearly 80, he moved to Bray, County Wicklow. I said to him, "Dad, whatever about coming in from Inchigeela when you were a boy, moving to Bray at 80 years of age, what business have you up here?"
It's fucking random, isn't it?
And you know, he said to me, "What are you on about?" He said, "That place is full of bingo and widows." He said, I'm in Clover." he was brilliant. But the thing was, as you were saying there about forgiveness and all that, I often think like that. And again, you have to preface everything by saying, "I think, I believe," or "At the moment, I understand it." Yeah. That we're all pilgrims, everybody, even people who don't claim they don't have faith or who don't go to church. I don't go to church really. I'd go to any church, no problem, and I stand up at the right places and behave myself and be kind and the best I can. But I think anybody who gets out of bed in the morning is a pilgrim. Everybody thinks, I think most of us are trying to get to a place where it doesn't hurt anymore.
Exactly.
So whether that means, once I have enough money, I'll be grand, or if I had that car, or if I had that lip job, or if I get rid of him, everyone is trying to get to a place where it doesn't hurt anymore. And in that regard, I think everybody's a pilgrim, and that might mean I need to go up and get a fix, or I need something to where it doesn't. And everyone, I think, is trying to come home. Everyone is trying to get home. And as you said there about the forgiveness thing, like that, I often think that self-forgiveness is a very difficult one. You've spoken a lot about that.
Yeah, that's the most important one, John, really, isn't it?
But when I look back at, say, that 11-year-old boy or whatever, or I look back at me when I was 18 and I was saucy with a bouncer or slammed the door of a taxi or whatever, I forgive myself. That's who I was then.
You have to.
That's who I was then.
We progress in life after that, you know what I mean? And if you can't be beating yourself over the back with a rod for the rest of your life, you know.
Yeah. Do you know the way
you can, but you get nowhere with it.
No. It doesn't make amends for it either, you know.
No, that's true too. That's important.
We've young kids at home, and it's great watching them, because the youngest is 10, and he's gone from the period of no questions when you tell him to do something to the questioning everything, and the ego's starting to develop at this stage, right? He's gone out of the kind of imaginary place, and he's gone into that place where he's developing. 14-year-old has the ego, trust me.
Right.
It's well developed, and it's there for a while. But what we do is we go from that period of the young child and the imagination running wild and trying to figure out the life, and then into the ego state, and particularly at the moment now with all social media and the Instagram, have to look this way and have to look that way. Kids are trapped in that, young teenagers, and that's where a lot of them are today. But they'll go through their period, and it'll work for a certain amount of time, John. Until maybe late 20s, early 30s, and then they'll say, the car isn't doing it for me, the nice house isn't doing it for me, their mental health might be a bit bad. And then they hit that little period of life where they'll start looking at maybe meditation. No, addictions might be there as well, but I think a lot of people go through that kind of process in life.
I often think it's with bereavements too. It might start, say, with a granddad or a grandmother or a parent or something, and you start to say, where do we go when we die? That's hugely important. Do you know what I mean? Or, you know, like I love folklore and history and stuff, and it's probably difficult for a lot of people, myself included, or it was, to try and realise that they were real people. They spoke with Cork accents. It was a wet Tuesday. They were walking down Winthrop Street. They were real people, and there's an awful lot more of them than there is of us. Do you know what I mean? We're just a top layer, and I'm particularly, like, in the last 5, 6, 7 or 8 years, I've lost a lot of good friends in their 50s and early 60s and stuff, and it's not that that's been an eye-opener, because that eye was opened years ago, but the point of the matter is, for me, I suppose now I'm asking myself, how many years have I left? 3, 15, 18? I know I haven't got 30 anyway, right? I don't expect. So it's like, I don't want to be arguing with anybody. I don't want where possible to avoid any kind of confrontation, stress, anything like that. And as I said, I think we're all pilgrims. I am anyway. I just want to get home. I want to become a really lovely old man. You know what I mean?
You know,
I wouldn't call you old anyway at the moment, but you are definitely lovely.
On a good day, Timmy.
You know, when you were growing up, were you always a big, strong man?
I was, but I had 8 big sisters, so I was loved into a marshmallow. I have sisters now. They come up to my waist and they still call me Baby John.
Go away with that.
Oh Lord, Jesus.
Yeah, they don't pick me up and hug me anymore though. But
what did you do after the boarding school?
Everything and anything, really. I was a fierce man for can I have a go? Can I have a go at something, you know?
Yeah.
And I look back now, and what happened was, I got some notion. It was probably a bad notion, really, that I wanted to do law, because I was a fierce man for. It's a bit like corporal punishment and stuff. It's the injustice that's done to other people really affects you as well. When you see a fella getting picked on, or you know he didn't do it, and he's still getting the clatter. So I had this mad notion I was going to ride into town and clean up the whole place. But anyway, I started in college, but I ended up starting a family before I started my studies, so I quit college and I was a dad at 20, so they were tough old years in terms of the economy.
What year are we talking about now when you were dad?
1979, 80. Yeah.
Tough times?
They were, because there was what they call it, the credit squeeze first. It was a full-on recession, it became. And I remember I was like living in Mary Street, but I remember we used to go out, like when we were on the dole, betimes, and pulling furniture out of skips, you know, to kind of try and heat the house and keep the kids warm. And I mean, people think that sounds like Charles Dickens. Sorry, that's how it was. But we still had a few laughs, and there was still plenty of crack. And it was tough. And I mean, like, bank loans were crazy. What they were charging people was scandalous. And Bob Geldof, like, quite rightly and quite angrily described it as police and priest. It was a tough old regime. You go to the tax office, go back, and dealing with anybody, the civil service, it was tough, unless you had some influence or you were educated or strong or whatever it was. So,
do you know, so you grew up in Coburg Street, you're living in Mary Street now, with a young family. So they're very city centre based. But also from the city centre, you have a lot of affluence and people doing really well in shops. Was the Cork City at that time very contrasting and kind of?
I'd say in the city centre, for the most part, it was run down. It really was, yeah. But you're right, I've noticed that. And usually with the bigger the city, places like Rio de Janeiro, Mexico City with 26 million, 30 million people, you'll find the fabulously rich living side by side with the fabulously poor. And it's just like that starts an energy, I think. That starts a kind of it starts something where people are preying off one another. But no, Cork was always Cork, in fairness. People were fairly decent and all the rest of it. But it would have been tough going. So in many ways, to be honest about it, RTÉ has been my university. I mean,
how did you manage to get into RTÉ?
I don't know. I don't know. A few failed attempts first and foremost.
But how does an opportunity like that come up?
Well, actually, believe it or not, there was no master plan. But what happened was, a couple of years later, there was an ad, picture of Gay Byrne. RTÉ is looking for a new presenter, and I applied for it. and it went on for months. There was thousands employed, and so there were interviews, auditions, demo tapes, went on for months. Eventually, I was in the last 16, and they put on a 6-week training and assessment course, and there was 16 of us, and someone was going to get the gig at the end. So I slept on a friend's floor above in Dublin, a fella who had a bed sitting right mines, and over every day, like, please God, let me get the job. I really would love this, you know. And at the end of the 6-week training course, I got a call. The boss wants to speak to you there. The head of Radio 1 wants to speak to you. We'd love you. Could not believe it, man. Oh my God. I could not believe it. Like,
that sounds like an
intense recruitment process.
It is, yeah, but it's still there's still challenges there. You're only as good as your last gig, kind of thing.
I know.
So, but I managed to stay on the horse for the most part, anyway. And
are you there since then?
There was a few pockets on the dole. There was a few hiccups, all right. But that does inform your thinking.
How long ago was that, John?
1987 was when I went in.
That's 34 years ago.
Yeah.
Fair play.
Mad, yeah. But it has been a brilliant university. I heard an ad a while ago for Proncius O'Din conducting the RTÉ Concert Orchestra. I shared a dressing room with him. I went on tour with the orchestra, worked with composers, interviewed Pavarotti, the China, the Arctic Ocean, all these things. And it wasn't like that I was looking for the juicy gigs, but, you know, filming with loggerhead turtles in Florida. I just, like, there's been some great things have come up. Like,
is there anybody, if I asked you, like, were you ever starstruck when you interviewed somebody or spoke to somebody? Is there anybody like that was so famous and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm talking to, I don't know. Or did you ever meet a hero of yours that stands out?
Gee, let me think.
There's a good few years to go back on.
There's a lot. Do you know something? Funny thing is, it's and I mean, you probably realise this as well. It's not the celebs, it's the amazing people you meet, and that sounds very condescending now, but it is leaning across a 5-bar gate talking to a farmer who tells you some amazing story, you know? So in that regard, I've met some amazing people, but most of them are unknown.
Yeah,
it's like there was a man I met last year. I'm cynical enough about charities. I've been stung once or twice, so I'd always walk around something when I'm asked, you know. So, but I was asked by Trócaire to go out, and I knew Ciarán Gallagher, and he's a solid man, and I did my own check online and everything else, looking for any corruption or problems or anything. So I went out, and went out to Guatemala, and as you know, there's a huge problem in Central America with migration, as we have in Europe. I mean, it's been predicted for years. Sub-Saharan Africa, it's going to run dry. Those people have had their homes looted for centuries by the Northern Hemisphere. And the same in South America.
There's so much violence in Guatemala. It's one of the worst places in the world to be a woman as well. At the moment, there's a documentary on YouTube about just women and girls just being murdered and not having the resources to, you know.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
What was it like when you were there?
I met some amazing people there, I have to say now, and because we went. Trócaire, in fairness, they do brilliant work out there, and I saw it firsthand. And it's Mayans are employed out there by Trócaire. Tis the native people. Many of them don't even speak Spanish. They speak Quechua, and so they reminded me of ourselves and what my parents' people must have been like. Small farmers, polite people. Catholics because of the Spanish conquistadors and all that, but really they're still into their old pagan ways, as we are, into their pishogues and their stuff, and but lovely people, have said, rock solid people, like people everywhere in the world, anywhere you go, pick a town, sound, right? Everyone's sound really behind it all. So but when we were out there, like you mentioned the women, we went for like about 10 hours to say Guatemala City to Ceposarco. It's just, you know, chickens on the street, some barefoot kids, and the women of Ceposarco. There was a military barracks out there. What happened there, to give you the story in very simple terms, and this is repeated over and over and over and over again, it's our story as well. Conquistadors, people move in their case it was the Spanish, and they moved in, they took over the place. The natives were only treated as slaves or as workers. Eventually the Spanish blood Guatemalans, in other words the well-to-do in Guatemala, eventually said, why are we sending tax to Madrid? We want independence. So there was this move for independence, but only by the well-to-do. The poor people didn't know where Madrid was or anything like it. So it became independent, but it was the same old regime. It was still the biggest states. Bit by bit, the Americans, and today, the Russians, it's not even Americans, Russians, Israelis. It's multinationals. Before you were invaded by countries. Now we're invaded by business. And they want your place, they'll get your place. And that's what's happened there. So I saw where they were, where they're mining for nickel there. And they're literally tearing down a mountain and flinging it into a lake. And they've poisoned all the fish. And I met this fellow called Abelino Chubb, Cal. I met him in prison. We got permission through the United Nations Human Rights Office. They managed to get us in to a high security prison in Guatemala City. No, I know you've you have a good idea what this is like, but it was dog rough. There were queues of people trying to get in to see their family, and it was heavy weaponry everywhere. They had all the gangs inside in one pen inside in the yard, and they were like, "Good morning, gringo." I was getting this through the wire, right? And what you call it, and then they had political prisoners and all this. So your man was brought up to meet us under armed guard, small man. He educated himself, a fella in his 30s, and he was 4 years behind bars without a hearing for trespass. He led a protest by peasants from a village onto a fruit plantation run by an American company, and he was done for trespass and for agitation or whatever it was. And I couldn't believe it. I'm sitting there, I feel like a real imposter syndrome. What am I doing here? So I have very poor Spanish, but the best I could, I explained to him through an interpreter, because he did speak Spanish, so it was only a one-way interpretation. Whereas with the natives, you need someone to translate it into Spanish and different Spanish into Czech.
I see.
So I was saying to him, look, I said, when I get back to Ireland, I said, I'll make sure people in Ireland hear your story anyway, and I'm terribly sorry it's like this, and how are you doing, and just chin wagging. But I still felt like a fraud. I'm going out there in a minute, getting the flight back to Ireland, and so anyway, but he was a beautiful man, and we had a great chin wag, and when I was leaving, I gave him a hug anyway, and I gave him my best Spanish. I mean, to stay as strong as you can, and hopefully this will pass too, and they let him off, and I was brought out back through the yards again, and doors, the sound of two doors closing behind you, right, and out onto the street. And I thought to myself, like, I'll probably never see that man again, I was quite upset about it, really, and I just but the weird thing was, about 7 or 8 months later, I'm in a hotel in Offaly, we're filming a new TV series, and I get a text from Trócaire. 3 Supreme Court judges have released him and cleared him of all charges. He's a free man. And the next thing was, he was coming to Ireland to receive the Oscar Romero Award. Bishop Oscar Romero was a brilliant man in El Salvador, and he's getting the award for human rights activism. And I'm presenting it to him. So within 10 months of that prison gate closing,
Guatemala prison to
I was drinking coffee in the Kew Co-op with him.
That's unreal.
I couldn't believe it. But something about that like he's a man who impressed me. He's a great man. But what impressed me what the thing about that is, anything is possible. When the odds look stacked hugely against you, do the next best thing you can. Just try and do the next thing the best you can.
There's another lesson in it too, is treat people nice when they're at their lowest, because you never know when you meet them again when they're coming up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's something you said there about the pillaging of the land. I sent you on the documentary, but it's called Banana Land, and people would enjoy it. Banana Land is about United Fruit from the United States, big fruit company going into Colombia.
That's exactly
moving
where
the
this
locals,
happened.
moving the locals off the land, farming the shit out of it for bananas and moving on. And FARC guerrilla rebels arming the farmers to fight against the United Fruit, who are armed by the government. But it's this whole war around the banana. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Well, you know something now? It was the same company, was in Guatemala, United Fruit as well. Yeah. And what happened was, when Guatemala got its independence, it was still the same overlords. It was still the Spanish stock, well-to-do Guatemalans were running the show. There was a popular revolution, because they said, how come we're getting a penny a day for packing the bananas, and the guys up in Florida are getting $2 a day? They try to agitate for some rights straight away. Someone makes a call to the White House. They're talking commie here now as well. Yeah. So all of a sudden there was an American-backed counter-revolution, and the whole thing was suppressed. They had about 7 or 8 years or 10 years of independence. They had 2 presidents, 2 worlds, and they had opened a few schools and a few clinics, and they were trying to get the thing going, but it was written off as being communists again, right? But the weird thing was that when you talked about that there, how the people get squashed in the middle. I was out in Malawi in Central Africa way back as well, and again I'm looking at people my own age.
It's one of the most poorest countries in the world.
It is, yeah. It was the third poorest country in the world, and it was then anyway. And to see men, like grown men like myself, you know, with polio and the AIDS orphans, they were like tumbleweed. They find each other and they're very good people. Like uncles and aunts would take kids in even when they can't afford to feed them. Like the famine in Ireland.
Yeah.
I came back and I bawled for a day afterwards. Because they are real people. It's Tuesday, and they're sitting down to die, or you know, it's like it's.
Do you know when you come back from Malawi and Guatemala and places like that, and you come back to Patrick's Hill, and does it give you like, are you depressed at the privilege that we have here, or does it give you a gratitude for what we have, or how do you compartmentalise it and kind of move on from it?
Well, for me personally, gratitude. The older I'm getting, the more grateful I am. You know, because there's no guarantees in life, and like even with my parents, like life is a lottery. You don't get to pick your parents, as you know. And I my numbers came up there. At least I got 2 gentle parents. You know, so there's no prize for that. Life is a lotto.
Yeah.
And I've landed back in my hometown doing what I love doing. So I'm not smug about it. I hate smugness. I hate people going, oh well, he's doing great now. And a request there now from my daughter who got a first class honours. Right, that can all be taken like that.
Yeah.
All you need is a quick invasion, and all of a sudden you're prison number 6543. You're not anybody, you know.
I
So I'd be mindful of that, particularly when you see it up close like that. But in Malawi, the neighbouring country Tanzania was Tanganyika, and it was run by the Brits. They were there for years, and when it got independence, Julius Nyerere, who only died a few years ago, was their first president. And I think this is brilliant. I remember reading a little book that he had written. But when he got independence, it was a really poor country, barefoot poor country. The Yanks came calling and they said, listen, we can secure your country for you, we can put in a base there, and we'll develop an airport, we'll have a Ford plant and a Coca-Cola plant, and we'll boost your economy, and all we want is landing rights there in your. And he said, I'll consider it. And the Russians came as well, and the Russians said, listen, we'll develop the airport for you, and we'll put in Aeroflot regular flights to Europe for you, and we'll have LADA or whatever it is we'll be making and develop. And he considered both, and they rejected both. And when he was asked, he said, how can you, he says, reject, he says, those offers, he said, when your people are so poor? And he said, yes, he said, my people are poor, but my people also say, when 2 elephants go to war, it's the grass gets trampled. And that's
so
it.
true.
That's exactly what happens in places like Guatemala or in West Belfast or East Belfast or anywhere else.
Even we're talking about the South American link with the United States and that. Did you ever come across the priests in Argentina so Argentina had a kind of a left-wing government, but there was a lot of Jesuit priests over there, but some of them were Irish, and I'm sure one or two of them was from Cork, but they were murdered by the government and American-backed right-wing dictatorships. You know, there was a coup.
Yeah.
There was a lot of Irish Jesuit priests over there.
Funny enough, my first cousin was actually a priest in Honduras, and he would have been a revolutionary theologist as well. And Rome was getting a bit fed up because the priests were going not quite native, but they were seeing the injustice, and they were saying, surely, if my mission is to administer to these people, and they're being beaten up by, like even in Guatemala, like I was in the town of Coban, and I saw 2 military trucks coming in. When the military arrive in, everybody just turns away and does something else, you know. And that's still there. They were very frightened people. I was talking there about Seppo Sarko and about the women.
Yeah.
These were women who were brought in supposedly as cleaners to the barracks, and were physically and sexually abused. And through the support of Trócaire, who also ran classes for the men, you know, so there was a lot of shame about what had happened, got them up on their hind legs, and it took them 7 years. And they were brought by bus. Trócaire paid for some of the hotel rooms. There was some other charity paid for the lawyers. It took 7 years. 7 years. And they got those 2 officers into the dock. And they won their case.
Cool.
And they wore veils. They would never appear in public until they won their case. And I met them. There's only 5 of them left. They're old ladies now. And, oh man, weak in the presence of beauty. They were just the most beautiful people, you know. I said to one of them, I said to her, look, I said, I'm sorry that I'm asking you about this this time again, you know. I said everybody probably asks you about that time instead of how are the chickens or how are your grandchildren. I know. And she was saying no. She was saying you're a good man. She was, and this was going two ways. It was going from Quechua to Spanish and from Spanish back into English, and but they were just like they had found their confidence. And the day we were there was a mass, and there was a kind of not a fiesta now, but there was a celebration of the anniversary. They had won their case 2 years previously, and the whole village. I found that very emotional, to be honest with you. Like all the men were marching with them as well, up on their hind legs. You know, we're not taking it anymore. And the way we beat them was education. People helped us. People helped us to recover ourselves, and with a bit of legal expertise and stuff, we took them on and we won the case. And now what they're scared about out there is an amnesty for all the military.
No accountability then.
No accountability, and. You know, like, Jesus, so as you say, do I feel grateful? I feel hugely grateful. And when I hear people whinging about, I don't want to wear a mask in this place, or I don't want to do that, or why can't I park here? I'm thinking, there's people dying of hunger today someplace else. Like, come on, lads.
And there's people in countries where they don't have access to masks or vaccines, they mind boosters, you know. So we're very privileged in that sense. What was the conditions like in that Guatemalan prison, and is that the only prison you've been in, or have you been in prisons around the world?
No, I've been I haven't done no, I haven't, and I've always been coming out on the same day. So you know, but I've done a few things in Overstown and places, and Trinity House for the young offenders. And that was an eye opener anyway.
What was it like?
Well, I remember
where's Trinity House?
It's in North County Dublin. It was Father Peter Lavelle was looking after it, but he had me out there, and I realised actually I saw in the front row like some of the parents were in very bad shape, and I was thinking, how could these 16-year-olds be doing any better?
They had a chance. Like.
But the mom and dad isn't, and you can't blame the parents either. The parents are the way they are because the way they are, and
there's no blame.
There's a quote on the wall there from Dr. Gabor Mate. It's down beside Rowan.
I saw your interview with him.
But he basically said that there's nobody to blame. It's like intergenerational, and it's passed on, and you can't go blaming your mum because she have a story, and you can't go blaming your granny because she have a story, so there's nobody to blame, and it's just. But at the same time, we have to kind of take responsibility for it.
Absolutely,
you know what I mean?
And we have to talk about it as well, because by talking about it, the next person down the line who's maybe after having similar experiences can learn that there is a way out of it.
But you know something, like that, you know, I've been a fan of years in the beginning. Someone tipped me off, and I got on board there with your podcast from the very beginning, and I just thought like, and you laugh now when you hear this, but when I was saying earlier on that I think like they were all pilgrims, everyone's trying to get to a place where it's better, where it doesn't hurt. I honestly would say that the work you're doing, and it's not to give you big heads or anything, it's holy work. You're going out to the edge. It's all in the Bible about, you know, the prodigal son, about no matter what people have done, there's redemption there for anybody. Anybody can come back in. And that's true of addiction. I know some people don't get that amazing grace, that moment when they can, you know, whether it's a case of saying, like, help, my ego has collapsed, I just need, but to do what you're doing. And I'm not blowing your trumpet, but I just think it's so valuable, because not everybody will go to counselling, but somebody in bed or in the doorway might look at it and say, Jesus, but I think that's hugely important for people to realise no matter what you've done, it can be sorted, you know, and no matter what you've done, it's okay. We've all messed up. Everyone has messed up. And so that's really why I think like what you're doing is so valuable. I've lost a lot of like good friends, people I've loved a lot to mental health issues, addiction, this, that and the other. And it breaks your heart. And as you get older, you realise it's not good for me or them to continue this merry-go-round or whatever it is. And so I've said goodbye to friends, and I haven't seen them since. But there's 3 or 4 that have come back in through NA, AA, like out of the blue. It's a bit like the prodigal son story. I remember getting a letter once in Dublin from a friend of mine who I hadn't seen for about 5 years. And he just said, listen, 'tis me. He said, just to let you know, that I'm on a 12-step program, and I'm at the step now where I try and make amends with people I might have hurt along the way, and I know I was ratty towards you and everything else, and you didn't deserve any of that, and I'm fear sorry, and there's no pressure on you. This is part of my own recovery. He said, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm really sorry about all of that.
He's back. The true self is back.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I know, I mean, I don't know But I've heard like that when you're battling addiction, particularly that like you can't relax. You've got to kind of
the conscience.
You've got to stay awake.
Yeah.
Got to stay awake.
The conscience of the actions whilst in addiction and the people you hurt is there.
But the apology wasn't important. Like that didn't matter because
it never is.
No,
it's not.
No. But
it's
what was
just seeing someone doing so well is the important factor.
Do you have that from your father though? Yeah. Your father knew like when that person robbed from him and came back the same night, not realising.
Yeah.
It wasn't personal. He knows that he's in a bad situation, and if that person was in his right mind, he wouldn't dream of doing that. So there was never any resentment held, and I think you have that as well.
Yeah, and you know something now, that sounds like I'm holy God, but the truth is I don't have any difficulties with forgiveness. I get fed up with people, and I whinge about people, and I thought about people, and I don't want to see him again, and this and that and the other. But deep down, I know he is the way he is because that's the way he is. It's that simple. Yeah. And it's like there's a beautiful there's an old Buddhist, I love a lot of the old Buddhist maxims, and there's a lovely one about this frog who's trying to cross a river, but it's a swollen river and there's a fierce flood, and a fox says to him, hey, do you want to lift across? Fox says, go away. And the frog says, not a hope, you're a fox, you leave me, I won't eat you. If you want to lift now, get on my back because I'm going now, but you leave me, I won't eat you. Go on. So the frog gets up on his back. And halfway across the river, the fox turns back and grabs him in his mouth. And the frog said, but you told me you wouldn't eat me. I know, he said, but I'm a fox. So the moral of the story is, are you going to blame him because he's a fox? Because if that's the case, we should go out there and we should get every single tiger in India and kill them. Because they kill baby deers, like. So if there wasn't people breaking and entering, there wouldn't be any guards. If there wasn't any, do you know what I mean? It's like all this terrible stuff makes the world go around. And I'm not kind of making light now of people getting hurt, and I've been hurt myself. But what I'm saying is, like, you know, even like, there's cross people out there, there's cross animals out there. What can you do? Yeah,
that's a very spark in my sociology mind, but it's a very functionalist perspective. A functionalism is like the world is an organism, and every part of it has a function that makes the organism work.
Yeah.
But it can be used by certain politicians to kind of excuse stuff. Something that sticks out is Michael McDowell was the Minister for Justice in back in the day. I know when they were in power with Mary Harney and all that, and they were on to him about inequality, and he says, sure, there's a certain level of deprivation is normal in any society. Well, that's grand for him to say. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we have to be careful with that, but it is a good point, like that. You know, everything does have its part, and a functionalist perspective on crime as well would be like the people that commit crime, they are there to show us how not to be. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's how you're not supposed to act. Do you know what I mean?
I just feel sometimes that that maybe we're poo-pooing what men bring to the table, what a lot of men bring to the table, and I know a lot of men bring war to the table too. But there's other things. There's good dads. There's strong shoulders. There's kindness. There's there's all the things that men bring to the table too. And I would hate that we looked around in 20 years' time and said, what do we do with all the men? You know. I know,
and like the stuff now, like the glass ceiling in terms of inequality for women's rights and pay and all these things, they're all very valid causes and feminism and all that. But like in terms of the men, like most people in homeless services are men, most people in prisons are men, treatment centres men, suicides men. Do you know what I mean?
There's a lot of men not doing well, and the thing about it is that's coming from the perspective, as I said, from Baby John. I have 8 sisters, I have 4 daughters, I have 6 granddaughters. I've been blessed amongst women. I walked out of pubs that wouldn't serve women pints. I went on protest marches for women's rights. All I'm simply saying is that we need to have a look at the men as well, not tell them what to do or tell them that they need to get in touch with their feminine side. Maybe they need to get in touch with their Aaron John as well. And as you say, like, I think that, you know, a lot of men are not doing well at the moment. And there's another thing too, and I think it's a bit of a cliche, that men don't talk about their feelings. Every locker room I'm in, there's people talking about their feelings. All my life, I go for a walk with a buddy and we're chatting about this and that, and what you make of that, and I'm worried about this. And
it is changing, though, John. It is changing.
But I think, and an awful lot of the men I know are good with. No, maybe it's just the men I know, but even at a certain level, even in Turner's Cross or something, I often think to myself, look, men are expressing their feelings there. There's the lap of honour. There's the minute silence, and you better observe it. This is what we do to say respect to this guy's dad, you know. So even through that tribal thing, men do have ways of expressing, you know.
When I'm at a Cork City match, and I was, I'm a Pats fan, you know.
That's allowed. We all are across the carry, I suppose. Yeah.
But like, I was at the FAI Cup final, and which we beat Derry City on penalties. Not Derry City.
No.
We beat Bowes.
We
beat Bowes on penalties, but I'm kind of a quiet, kind of a reserved kind of a guy in general. But when I'm out in Turner's Cross, if I'm watching Pats or anything like that, it'd be animated, it'd be screaming and shouting, and then the match is over, you go home, and then that's it. Then you know until the next Friday night, you know. But it's just, it gives you a release, doesn't it?
Yeah,
and it's like that's an appropriate space where you could scream and roar and shout somebody on.
But you know something about that as well. Like, I have to say, the behaviour of an awful lot of English football fans is like, not just English football fans, but let's put it this way: misbehaving football fans is pathetic. It's pathetic. It's a group. It's a sure sign of cowardice.
Small element to that in Cork City.
If you're running with a crowd, it's a sure sign of cowardice. I remember a fella giving abuse one time to one of the Bakers, Richie Baker, and he was on the right wing, and Desi. They were both wingers, right? And when it came to the second half, he'd been abusing one for the first half. Your mother, your... It was awful, like what he was saying to him. Your mum was only 4 feet away from him, right? And he kept at it. And the second half then, we had Desi Baker for the first half. He said, we have Richie Baker for the second half, to put up with you for the second half. I said, and we're all putting up with you for the whole 90 minutes. I said to him, it's a well-known fact that men who show abuse of football matches have small willies. Shut him up. But the thing is, like, I can't stand that. That's running the pack. I hate that thing, right? But I do think it is a form of expression. It is a form of expression, and to belong to a tribe is probably very important.
Do you know, a few years ago, our Pats were down Turner's Cross and up in the away section in Turner's Cross, and I'd be very proud now out watching City, you know, because we've a great following. The shed is brilliant, the atmosphere. We're probably, you know, the only club in the city, but it was a shame that night after the game. No, I think City won, but in the Pats section there was a lot of families and kids and stuff. But their windows and their bus was destroyed at the back, you know, where the away supporters bus. And there's actually no need for it.
No.
Do you know what I mean? There are only families coming down for the night. You know.
But you know the bottom line? You know and I know. Max 12 people were involved.
That's what I'm saying.
Max 12, probably 4.
But the victory is gone in that. Do you know what I mean? Because that's what's on the headlines, that's what's on Twitter, and that's what's retweeted.
But you didn't witness the carry on up in before the cup final, no? And again,
no, but
a dozen fellas purporting to be Bowes fans with hoodies like, let's pretend we're Italian and chase people.
I know, it's ridiculous. And you know who's in that pub? Families.
Families, I saw the pint glasses flying and everything.
It's fucking ridiculous. But I remember a couple of years ago, City were playing away to Derry, and there was fucking murder up there, and there was fellas running in homes, and there would be
were you with that?
No, I wasn't at that, but one or two of my friends were. But again, they went up there to watch the game, but a handful went up there for trouble, and they nearly all fell in for it then, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So but do you know something? Like another one, my guru, my old man. No, he was a wise old dude. I tell you a lovely one actually about him. I was up in Dalymount Park with him one. He only discovered the League of Ireland through me. Really, he was a bus driver and he was kept going all the time. And but it was only in his old age really that he started going to matches with me. He went to Switzerland as well. We went to a few away games with Cork City. And tell you what, those players handle themselves like gentlemen. They'd always carry his bag for him, or Mr. Creedon, how are you? They were so good to him. But I remember one day being above in Dalier, and we were getting a very raw deal from the ref, right? And there were several like justified calls for penalties and frees and everything else, and the City crowd were all booing him like mad. And the old man tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, "Don't ever boo another human being." I thought, that's one of the best bits of advice I ever got. Don't ever boo another human being. There's a person on the receiving end of it.
I know. You can look at it in different forms of context as well.
Yeah.
What he's saying, like, is don't be critical of someone, don't be judgmental as someone, you know.
My old man developed a great draw for Cork City and for Patsy Frayne in particular. He was a great hero for my dad, Patsy, and equally Patsy loved my dad. And but one day I was inside and work doing the breakfast show on Radio 1, and there was a brilliant photograph in the Examiner taken by Dennis Minahan, I think, of Patsy Frayne coming off the pitch with about 10 minutes to go, and he's spattered in mud, and Jerry Harris, the late Jerry Harris, is helping him into his tracksuit. He's one arm in the tracksuit, but he's still watching the match, and he already has a king-size cigarette lit, and he's watching the game. He's like he fell out of the Somme. He's like he fell out of the trenches, right? And he's putting on the thing, and I cut it out and sent it to my dad and said, I said, spit in the back of that and stick it up over a night light. I said, your hero, Patsy Frayne, right? So I sent it off, sent them off the picture in the post out to Bray. So I thought no more about it. But a year later, anyway, Cork City win the cup, and we're inside in the Burlington after the match, and my dad is sitting there and he was having his glass of stout and everything. He's delighted that they won the cup and that no one got hurt and it was a great old day and everything else. And the next thing is Patsy Frayne arrived down with the suit like after, and Jesus, Patsy, congratulations. Oh, Mr. Creedon, how are you? Do you mind you, Mr. Creedon? Connie Pa, how are you? Right, so they were chatting away mad, and he was saying, Patsy, he said, you were brilliant. He said, we did our best anyway. He said, you were brilliant. He said, and Patsy, he said, you know, I'm a religious man. Oh yeah, Connie, because Patsy, in fairness, as I believe it, as I understand it, I was with him in Jerusalem as well.
Yeah.
Patsy has a great interest in those things, in the spiritual world. But my dad said to him, you know, he said, I have great devotion, he said, to Padre Pio. He took out his wallet, and there was a picture of Padre Pio. He says, his mother and myself, Padre Pio was our number one man. Anytime one of them was sick or anything, we'd always pay to Padre Pio. Turns over to the next page. St. Teresa of the Little Flower, he says, my dad, he said, my brother John, he said, we always had great devotion to her. He says, turn over to the next page. There's the picture of Patsy with the fag. And he goes, and there's the greatest of them all, St. Patrick of the Fintler Tip. And Patsy went, what? Ah, Jesus, Connie, that's a sin. You can't be doing that. It's like this prayer book, a picture. But he had set that up. He knew that eventually I'd get to see him. And I show him that. You know what the fella told me recently? You know what the fella told me recently? He said, there was 12 kids now in my house, and my parents were generous to a fault. There was a couple of aunts lived with us, and anybody who needed a place to stay, as my old man would always say, there's always room for one more. But I remember a fella who was working in CIE in the buses said to me recently, he said, your old man, he said, he was a beauty, he says. And your mother, he said, I used to cross town to have a look at your mother, he said. But he said, your dad was a beauty, he said, he was some character, he said. I remember being in here, he said, in Capwell, he said, Christmas week, he said, 2 or 3 days before Christmas. And your dad came into the weigh room, he said, is where we put in the tickets and the cash into the cashier and through the hatch. And he said, over in the wall, just like there now, he said, there's pigeonholes, he says, and every driver had his own pigeonhole, so a bunch of keys could be left there for him, or a message or whatever. So we were all chatting away, Matt, he said, and the next thing was, your dad went over, and he said, there was 3 cards or letters inside and thing. So when we were chatting, he's opening them, right? And the first one had a £1 note inside it, and it said, Dear Connie, thanks so much for stopping between the stops for me. I hope I didn't get you fired. Best wishes, Mrs. O'Sullivan, or whatever it was, and a £1 inside it. Second one, 10-shilling note inside it. Young Barry, 'tis on, Mr. Creedon said this, Mr. Creedon said that, he's mad about you, God bless you, and have a great 1973 or whatever it was. And the third one, again, another thank you note and happy Christmas to you and your big family, a £1 note inside it again. And the lads were telling me, your man was telling me, he said, we were looking at your dad, like, and he was saying, aren't people great? He said, all we're doing is our job, he said, and they go to this trouble for us, like, and he said, he rolled up the money and put it to his top pocket and wished us happy Christmas and left. We were saying, how does he get it? Like, he's some charmer, how does he get away with that? Like, people are mad about him. He said, your dad waited until April before he told us. He sent the 3 cards to himself.
Fuck off.
Yeah, and there I am struggling with my sums, and instead of helping me, my dad is outside in the shop sending cards to himself. He just set it up as a stunt.
He's trying to teach the rest of the boys how to do the right thing.
That's what he's trying to do. That's what. Can you imagine going to that trouble?
Yeah.
Going to that trouble of a £2 note and 10-shilling note, stamps,
and
posting them. When he had 12 kids and enough to be doing.
And making up the names as well.
And then letting it sit.
But he was, you know, the thing with the Patsy and the wallet, knowing like that eventually the day will come and that way.
Oh, the long game.
Happy to play the long game,
yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
he was a good card player too, I believe,
that's brilliant, What's life like now, John? So you're on the radio, and you give us a shout out the other night. Thanks a million.
Oh, I did, yeah. No,
you play as a nice mix, don't you?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
A bit of everything.
You know what? Genuinely, I'm really grateful. And I know that sounds kind of condescending, but I'm really very lucky. I don't look after myself probably as well as I should, but I'm still working every morning. I'm awake and I'm trading away. I'm doing stuff I love doing. Like, I have a great graw I love being Irish, I love being from Cork. An interesting thing actually about the Cork thing is, because it goes on all the time, sometimes I get a bit tired of that Cork thing, because because everybody loves their home place, and sometimes like, or I get slagged off over it. You know, where you're from? I'm from Laois. Oh, very good. I'm from Galway. How are the footballers this year? I'm from Cork. Oh, he's from Cork. I know. And the thing about it is, it's a running gag. It's not that we genuinely think we are superior.
We know it.
Some people probably do. Yeah. But you know, like, you know, we go to Paris too. We've got multi-channel now as well, so it's not that we're that inward looking. But you know what I think it boils down to? We're like Texans. It's the biggest county in it's the biggest state in the Union, right? And for hundreds of years, like the Cork Constitution and the Cork Examiner are going for hundreds of years. We've had our own daily newspaper. So it's always like English, you know, or Dublin train crash, one Cork man dies or whatever. It's always, or I saw a brilliant headline once. What was it? It was an accident in England on the Underground, and the headline in the Evening Herald was English train kills Irishman.
Oh God.
So it depends on how you see things.
Very ethnocentric headline.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I love being from Cork. I love being able to trade from my hometown. But if I was from Sligo and I was abroad, I'm sure when I'd see Ben Bulbin for the first time, and I do understand how it feels for a dub when they're up there on the hill and they see the boys in blue coming out. It's not my tribe, but I understand. You know, so I think it's probably travelling is good like that.
And you wrote a book on all this, didn't you?
I wrote I did.
Recent enough book?
Yeah.
Place called Home, is it?
That place we call home. That place called Home. What's it called? That place I haven't read it yet, but I heard it's good. No, That Place We Call Home. And really, it's about place names. It's about love of place. And even like it's things people probably don't stop and think about, like Ireland. Where did the name come from? Why are we called Ireland? Cork is very simple. It's Corkig Moor Muin. It means the big marsh of Munster. That's what it was.
Knocknaheeny is Knocknaheena. Hill on Friday.
Yeah.
Up the hill.
I've read that translation, but I sometimes think it's Knocknaheena. That it's the hill of the birds, like for hunting the wren. But I could be wrong. I've seen it given, as you said.
Ardcullen, where we're from, Ardoncullen, which is
Holly, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And Holly Hill is the region then.
Of course. See, it all. But even Churchfield, it makes sense. I expect that's the field.
Yeah, Chapel Field.
Goran the Braher is Goran. Well, no, some people think it's Garon, meaning a shortcut, but it's not. It's Goran, as in a grove, a small wooded area. Namraher of the brothers. So that obviously there was a monastery there. So there still is.
Farn Reed then?
Farn is a territory or a land unri of the king. So there was obviously some mini king living over there in that hump, and but all of those places, like, and it tells you an awful lot about. For me, the place becomes 3D. A walk through town for me becomes 3D now, because you know, when you start to know where you're from. And you know what I often think too, like even in terms of youngsters, like something I'd love to do, not now because I'm too busy and all that, but in my old age I'd love to live long enough to go around and give talks to primary schools, to kids, to say being from Cork is brilliant. Do you know why? And tell them. So that if you get a sense of place, if you love your place, if you love your hurlers, you won't disrespect people. If a tourist asks you, where's Shandon? I'm going up that way, I'll bring you, you know? Rather than, you're less likely to put graffiti on the North Cathedral if you're proud of where you're from. And so, and also I think, again, for your mental health, I think if you have a sense of place, as I said to you, when I came back from boarding school and stood there with the Cork Hibs boot boys, I wasn't a tough rootin' tootin' fighting guy at all, but I was with my tribe. And they were from my part of town, and so there was a sense of place is a very important thing. So you can see how, say, being particularly at the moment, say with asylum seekers and so on, it can be very difficult to be in somebody else's place.
I know.
And so that's why I would say, like, come home. You know, like to try and, I don't mean come home to Cork. I mean for anybody to get a sense of place. And I used to go to all the African bars when they arrived first. I'd be in there, like, you know, how's it going? I'm saying, what are you doing here? And I was like, no, and like, and I'd have some great chats like that. Or you know yourself, you'll always meet a taxi driver. Where you're from? Lithuania. All right. Do people get confused with Lithuania and Latvia? All the time. Yeah, you know. And you know, so just to integrate people. I think if people buy into a place, if you start to love a place, you're not going to mess it up. You're going to represent it as well as you can. And also for your own mental health, just to know that I belong. These are my people. And that if I fall... I came across this beautiful thing. I almost have it off by heart. It's a history of Cork written in 1816. So it's pre-famine. And that's when the McCarthys and the Driscolls and all them moved into the north side of Cork. A lot of them were from the countryside who moved in because there was just terrible times. But he wrote this history of Cork, and it's about from ancient times all the way through the Vikings and everything else. But his last chapter, I felt like the guy was talking to me. His last chapter, he summarised, he said, I've laid out before you on these pages those who have walked this stage before us. The Viking, the Norman, the Raiders of the Sea, Spencer, the Cromwellians, the cruel penal times. All those people have now left the stage. What would they say to us? What would those spectral lips say to us? Could they speak? Methinks they would say peace. Let no Protestant assume ascendancy over any Catholic in Cork. It was a bad idea, it failed, it was bound to fail. Let no Catholic assume ascendancy over his Protestant neighbour. That too was a bad idea, that too failed, that too deserved to fail. Instead, he said, go forward, he said, in commerce, in the arts, he said, for the glory of your native city, he said. Let your only competition be that if a Corkman falls, which one of us will be first to reach him? And above all else, obey the primal precept, love one another.
It's beautiful.
And I thought, man, oh man.
What's the book?
Charles McCarthy. I don't know if it's available. It was a book that my old man gave me with a couple of old books. But I
guarantee somebody who's bound to have a copy or a link or something, or a PDF version. But that was brilliant, though.
But like the thing about it is, like, all truth, I think anyway, is universal and it's timeless. In other words, that's why when you hear some of the stuff that Jesus said, you'd have to say, you can't land a punch on that.
No, and if you think of all the countries that you've been through and all the cultures that you've been, we all follow similar principles. We're born, we celebrate birthdays, marriages, deaths. You know, we have aunties, cousins, and uncles, and that's the core of like anthropology. Like we're more similar than we are different.
Absolutely, and I think even all the great religions, they're all pointing ballpark the same direction.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
John, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm sorry for
looking at the buildings there and seeing which one of them would date it back that far.
Well, like when you're talking about pride of place, like our logo is our reservoir, Knocknaheeny.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got
it took me a while to tweak that.
We've got Shandon on the wall, and we've got all the buildings in Cork City on the wall here.
Church, the City Hall.
It's a great space.
Yeah.
But the work you're doing, I tell you, lads, I just think it's so, like, I think it's so valuable. You don't know who you touch or who's ready to hear that line now, or there's things I've heard in my life that didn't make sense, and then another day they did. Or like I find myself like I'm not a great reader. I don't read any fiction at all.
All my reading is about gathering information and learning something. You know?
The same here. But I find like that, and it's not that I'm a holy Joe. The opposite. I'm not practicing anything, but I do. I'm curious about where we go when we die. What's it all about? What's the big, what's the, and again, that's one of the things I've found. I've dipped into Hindu scripture, into like things like the Bhagavad Gita, Buddhist scripture, Christian scripture, and they're all pointing pretty much the same direction. And so there's some people like Khalil Gibran. Did you ever come across this guy? He was a Lebanese philosopher and poet. His own life was fairly tragic in ways, but like when we talk about the Cork thing and about being from Cork and all, one of the reasons I can relate to what he said in a poem that got him into the height of trouble in the Islamic world. He was an Islamic man from Lebanon, but he said I love my family but not as much as I love my village. I love my village but not as much as I love my province. I love my province but not as much as I love all of Lebanon. And people are with him all the way. I love all of Lebanon, but not as much as I love all of the Middle East. I love all of the Middle East, but not as much as I love the entire world. Hold on a while, you're going a bit too far there now, right? And that's the point I'm making, is that, love is expansive. It's not about, I love my kids. I want my kids to do good in their leaving cert. That's not love at all. That's preference.
And it's no good to you if all the other kids aren't doing well, because it takes a village, as they say.
But even apart from that, but it's not love. Don't be fooling yourself. That's preference.
Yeah, that's true.
To want every kid to do well. That's possibly love.
Yeah.
But, I love Cork, but I hate Tipperary.
I know.
That's not love at all. So that was one of the things he said. In that, but the book The Prophet, Jesus, that's a beautiful small little book, and it's about this holy man who is leaving this city where he brought wisdom and peace and tranquility and harmony. They're all heartbroken because he's leaving, but he has to go on with his mission, and he's waiting for the high tide to head off. And so before he leaves, they're all gathered on the quay wall, and they're all saying, "Do you have to go?" He said, "Yeah, my work is elsewhere now." And before he left, the mason steps out and says, "Before you go, speak to us again about our houses." And he says, "Your ancestors," he says, "in their fear of the dark, drew their houses very close together, in fear of animals and all of that." He said, "But now the danger lurks within the city walls, not without. Would that your houses were seeds in the palm of my hand." He said, "I'd sprinkle them through the meadows and the forests, so that when you come to meet each other in the evening after work, you'll come with the smell of herbs and flowers on you, not the grime of the city." A woman says, "Speak to us of our children." He says, "Your children are not your children. They don't even come from you. They merely come through you. And just as the great archer, which is the great creation, whatever, you are the bow, and you must be steadfast and true." In other words, you do your best to point them in the right direction, but where they land, it's their own business. None of your business. And there's one thing after the next, and you kind of say, "Whoa, this is very fundamental." And it's true. Marriage is a very good one. He said that's often cited actually at marriages, where he says, "You must work together, but like the two pillars of a temple, you're maintaining a structure. But if you lean on each other, like codependency and stuff," he said, "the structure's bound to fall. So you must stand apart where the breeze can blow between you. But you're you're united in this joint venture." It's a lovely little book.
Who's the author of it?
Khalil Gibran, KAHLIL GIBRAN. But there's another great piece in it as well about giving. And he says, "You say that you would give, but only to the deserving." He said, "Look at the apple tree in the orchard. It doesn't discriminate between the good man and the bad man, because the apple tree in its wisdom knows that to withhold its fruit is to surely perish."
That's a great line to finish on, John.
St. John of the Wireless.
St. John.
St. John of the Wireless, yeah.
Thanks a million,
Sorry,
John.
no, I'm sorry.
You,
I talk for Ireland, that's the problem.
Happy Christmas, John.
Thanks so much. Yeah. And G2. And
thank you, John.
Yeah,
it's great having you.
No, I'm delighted to be here.
I love listening to your stories. You should write a book in your stories at some point.
The other thing to be huge, to be that size.
I know. The encyclopedia of the Creedon.
I'd have to get a good editor.
But great talking, John.
Yeah,
happy
and
Christmas, Joe. And
yeah,
happy New Year.
Yeah, happy Christmas, everyone.
And happy Christmas to everybody, because this goes out Christmas Day.
All right.
And so happy Christmas to everybody, and thanks to everybody for their support
Thank you,
over
and
the last
Christmas.
18 months.
Yeah.
And
thanks to all the Patreons as well, James, for helping us to keep the studio and everything else going. So thank you again.
So we'll treat
and thanks to Rowan for his help.
Yeah.
As always.
You're a gentleman. Thanks.
Thank you.
Sinead.
Bye-bye.